You know, some of us are old enough to remember when every election wasn't a pivotal moment in human history in which an enlightened society finally chose the path towards fulfillment of their utopian dreams, or the barbarians had snatched power away from the sole possessors of righteousness and decency in order to bring about their evil plans to unleash hell on earth. It used to be that, an election would come and either your guy would get in, which would make you pleased, or the other guy would get in and you'd think, great, now I've got to put up with these jokers for the next 4 years. And that was about it. You kind of stayed kind of adult about it in those days. And it wasn't that long ago. Nowadays, though, it seems that we live in an era in which indulging in collective hysteria and sanctimony and self-righteousness is considered to be a sign of enlightenment or moral excellence or insight. So this guy just got elected Premier of the province of Ontario in Canada, where I live. And he's an old-timey kind of conservative guy. But because the center has moved so far to the left these days, a guy like Doug Ford and his party is being labeled or considered extreme right or far right or populist, which is kind of code word these days, it seems, for Nazi, basically. But he's not. He's in a more reasonable, less hysterical time, he would have been considered a pretty mainstream, traditional, center-right, fiscal, conservative politician. So his party just won the election. His party's the Progressive Conservative Party, and he's replacing the Liberal Party of Ontario, who've been running the place for 15 years. And they've actually become quite a far left party, socially and economically. And for the last 5 of those 15 years, the leader of the Liberals has been Premier Kathleen Wynne, who Jordan Peterson actually called the most dangerous woman in Canada.
I think she's the most dangerous woman in Canada. And her insistence on identity politics is unacceptable. The things that have happened under her watch at the universities are unacceptable. They're way worse than people think. The establishment of these social justice tribunals, that was what started all this. I read the documentation for the social justice tribunals and for the Ontario Human Rights Commission and all of that. They have the right to suspend jurisprudential precedent. It means that English common law is a oppressive patriarchy, and when necessary we won't abide by its dictates because it interferes with our ideological agenda. They're called social justice tribunals for a reason. It's not like this is hidden. So I am not a fan of hers at all.
Now, for some reason, how a political party actually governs seems to be kind of irrelevant to people who think of themselves as on the left or self-identify as progressives. It seems to be not so much about the real-world implications of the policy choices and even the competence of the government, and much more about how the individual progressive person feels about themselves when they get to say, look, I'm voting for the people, the politicians who really care. These ones really care. Not like the people on the right who, for some reason, want to deliberately hurt people and ruin the province. So you had the Liberals, who were far left. You had the NDP, which is the Socialist Party in Ontario, which is even further left, or you had the Progressive Conservatives. And the message that you're getting from people on the left is that if you didn't vote the way they wanted you to in this election, which was either to re-elect these Liberals or go even further off the cliff with the Socialist NDP, then you're a bad person, right? You're not as good a human being as they are. So have a look at this little screen grab that I got from my Facebook feed. This is an actual little meme thing, I guess, that popped up on my Facebook feed. And the message there is pretty darn clear, right? It's if you voted for the Progressive Conservatives, the PC party, then it doesn't matter what else I know about you, you're no longer worthy to be my friend. Right? So the attitude here is that if you don't share my political opinions, if you don't reflect my ideological preferences back to me, if you don't think the way I do about these things, then I'm not going to judge your ideas or your reasoning. I'm going to judge you as a person. I'm going to judge your humanity. And I'm going to judge your humanity as being below mine. You're not as good a person as I am because you don't agree with me politically. That's extraordinary. And it's the same thing you saw when Trump got elected, right? So people stopped being friends with each other because they voted for Trump. I don't think this used to happen. I think this is a fairly recent phenomenon within the last 10, 15 years that this started happening. And of course, the people who are willing to equate not agreeing with them about their political opinions with being a despicable human being are the progressive people who self-identify as compassionate and tolerant and inclusive and loving and caring and decent and wonderful and morally excellent, right? These are the people who are willing to go, right, I'm cutting you off as a friend because you don't agree with me about these political choices. It's extraordinary. So the rebuttals of the week I'm going to show you here was in response to Doug Ford getting elected and the attitude being expressed by a lot of the people commenting was essentially this, that how dare you not agree with me politically, I'm a better human being than you. And that premise was kind of set off by this person commenting named Peter G. And Peter's premise was that if you voted for Doug Ford, then you elected this millionaire, because he comes from a family who's run this very successful label making business. You're voting for this millionaire and you're endorsing his desire to hurt poor people and to ruin education in the province for some reason, right? So Peter wrote this. He wrote, "The millionaire will go after social services, education, and the working poor. Say goodbye to the social contract in Ontario." Right, now this is despite the fact that the party that he would have preferred you vote for, the Liberal Party, who were in power for 15 years, that their policies directly hurt the working poor and people on fixed incomes and the elderly because of the way they mismanaged the economy in the province in general, right? We wound up with a debt after this 15 years in the province of Ontario of something like $320 billion. We're paying $12.3 billion a year just in interest on this debt. The debt in Ontario is greater than the GDP of 75% of the countries on the face of the earth. We have the highest sub-sovereign debt, that is in any jurisdiction below the level of the national or federal jurisdiction, the highest sub-sovereign debt of any jurisdiction on earth. The Liberals made a mess of the electricity generation and distribution in Ontario, so we wound up with the highest electricity rates on the continent of North America. And who do you think this hurts, right? This hurts the working poor. It hurts people on fixed incomes. It hurts the elderly. People wound up getting their electricity shut off in the middle of winter because they couldn't afford to pay these extraordinarily ever-increasing electricity bills, right? But doesn't matter, right? You're supposed to vote for the Liberals anyway, or the NDP, who thought that the Liberals weren't radical enough, should have been even more extreme, right? Because the point here is always the same. It's not about what these policies actually wind up doing in the real world. They don't really pay attention to that. All they really focus on is how they personally feel, the gratification they get, the boost to their self-image, their persona of being, I'm one of the wonderful people, and therefore I vote for the party that claims to be equally wonderful to me, right? So Tanya wound up essentially mirroring this same attitude, and it was to Tanya that I responded. And Tanya wrote this: I don't have a problem with a country and its people taking care of the marginalized and less fortunate among them. It's human, ethical, and respectful. So what Tanya's saying there is, if you didn't vote the way she thinks you should have voted, then you want the opposite of human, ethical, and respectful for some reason for the people of your province, of your home. You want to hurt the marginalized and the less fortunate. That's essentially what you're after if you didn't agree with her political choice. So I responded to Tanya like this. I wrote, except that you people don't actually care about the marginalized and the less fortunate, because those are the people who are most hurt when the cost of living rises, when taxes increase, when the cost of electricity and heating go through the roof, when billions of tax dollars are squandered, and when the economy eventually tanks. If you cared about those people, you would be livid at the political parties who have created those pressures on poor people and who promise to add to the problem while pushing the province off a fiscal cliff. So spare us your pronouncements of your sense of your own moral superiority, Tanya. What leftists care about is their own ego and being able to tell themselves how incredibly wonderful, enlightened, and morally excellent they are. That's why they reflexively support anything that's marketed to them on the front end as progressive and compassionate, and are completely indifferent to the real world results on the back end when those policies are implemented.
This is going to get ugly.
Never okay.